go home, as the sound of tens of thousands of passengers stranded at the airport in one of China's top tourist destinations, the coastal city of Sanya on the island of Hainan Province, China's southern Hawaii. Now, at least 3 other cities in Hainan Province under lockdown, and a total of more than 1,000 cases on the island province. Now, under lockdown, the running joke is that everyone thought the Chinese government was going to blockade the island of Taiwan, but instead, who knew they'd ended up blocking their own island of Hainan instead? But backtrack this just hours ago. Imagine you took your family on a week-long vacation to Hawaii. As you enjoy the beautiful everything Hawaii has to offer, suddenly, the Honolulu officials barge into your hotel room and they tell you to self-quarantine for 2 cases that they found in the area. Well, that is the situation in Sanya now. Some 80,000 tourists are stranded on the island. Hotels are jacking up prices amid all of this. Airplane tickets to Shanghai cost 7,000 yuan. That's about $1,000 US. And for domestic flight too. Honestly, if the US and other nations, the free people, didn't put up a fight to end the pandemic measures, it wouldn't surprise me if world governments continue to abide by the CCP's measures, which they're doing since the early days of the 2020 start of the pandemic. The Chinese regime, with the help of the WHO, told us a lie, that masks and lockdowns work. And today, the shining example of what is not working is precisely China. Today's variant is largely Omicron as we know it, but we are nowhere near the severity it was back 2 years ago, and therefore no longer need to abide by COVID measures because, well, we here have a constitution that tells us personal freedom is a thing that's set by the founding fathers. Yet in China and elsewhere, that freedom, you cannot even begin to fight back because it wasn't even written in the founding principles. So what we have is happening in China seems to be a repetition of the same old zero COVID model striking once again. Sanya City's government announced on Saturday that tourists who have had their flights canceled will be able to rebook or book into hotels at half price. But dozens of tourists on Sunday complained that that doesn't seem to be the case. Now, on WeChat Groups, which is an app from China that's one of the top messaging platforms, says that their hotels were not able to apply the rules set by the government, and they still had to pay rates similar to the original prices. 2 stranded tourists told Reuters they were in such situation. A foreign tourist who lives in China and was on honeymoon in Sanya says that additional issues for stranded tourists included massive price hikes in food delivery fees, meal prices at hotels, as well as flight tickets out of Hainan. Food supplies in the hotel were also running low. Even the Chinese state media are reporting on the cost out of tourists' own pockets, upward of thousands of yuan a day, which is still thousands even after converting it to US dollars. In one case, as Reuters account, a family living in a 4-star hotel is paying for their own expenses on a government-enforced restriction week, and they have to resort to eating instant ramen every single day as expense rack up. Now, a total of around 1,000 positive cases has demonstrated to Chinese authorities, and Chinese authorities only, it seems, that the zero-COVID lockdown is needed. Now, this time on a top tourist destination in China, and it seems that according to officials, those stranded will be set free in a week, provided that they test negative. Now, the sudden lockdown is catching many off guard as the impact of zero-COVID continues to damage China, from the economy to now tourism. The effects are real. In just 2 months' time, China's major cities saw the harshest lockdowns ever, including Shanghai, Beijing, and a few other big cities in China, and tens of millions suffering strict COVID measures. Now, these include massive COVID testing daily, and many as 2 to 3 times a day if they were required. And these included also the draconian health app, which dictates red, yellow, green what you can do and cannot do. So those who test red are barred from essentially any physical movements outside of their quarantine zone or their little unit, whereas a green code is the only way essentially in a dystopian society to access that society in China today. Now, as the classic Chinese propaganda engage and seems to be coming in the next few days, Sanya is filled with positive news so far in comparison to what is actually being reported. One stranded woman says, quote, "We don't know who to go to. The internet only has positive news about Sanya, such as the Sanya municipal government is doing a great job or that people are coming in for tourism." So the government says that they will try to resettle those 80,000 stranded tourists as if the whole country thinks that we are not the victims but the beneficiaries. That's according to Reuters. As many as 80,000 tourists are important to save, the Chinese regime really cares much more about controlling those 7, 8, 9, or even 1,000 cases. That's because the legitimacy of the zero-COVID pandemic measure must be held valid and correct at all times. Said by the Chinese leader Xi Jinping himself back in March of 2020, the war on the pandemic started in China as zero-COVID is the personal policy deployment of Xi Jinping himself. Such measures are equivalent to the power and the legitimacy of Xi Jinping. So this really explains why, even as the Chinese economy faces a contraction, the Chinese yuan is at 5 months low, that Xi would still maintain his pandemic measures. Because the last thing the Chinese Communist Party wants to see is the people calling out this credibility or the lack of, which is, by the way, on the line for Xi Jinping as he seeks a third term in power this fall. Now, since Xi Jinping has no real domestic or international achievements as the 20th National Congress approach in the fall, where he seeks a third term in power, it is very likely zero-COVID continues to dominate headlines as we approach that date. And the question remains, what is the state of China's economy as the pandemic measures has caused so much trouble for it? Adding to the list of things that China can spy on you, this is the latest report on battery banks. Now, these are common among cell phone users today where we use 10 plus hours of daily cell phone swiping, browsing, or social mediaing, all of these things. And it seems that one charge overnight isn't enough for us. So battery banks provide the on-the-go solution for charging, and often they're light and sizable to carry in pockets or bags. Now, mainland Chinese media recently revealed that China-made portable power banks can actually eavesdrop or locate users, and they're available on the Chinese market and not regulated by the Chinese regime. So far, no indication from Western media as to how many power banks from China imported into the West contained this capability. But knowing what we know, TikTok and other apps, coffee makers, Chinese electronics like TV speakers, cameras, phones, and computers, this may not be possible or entirely impossible to say that, well, China is spying on you in the latest power banks. Now, a chip as tiny as the fingertip can do all that work, especially given now there are specially designed spy power banks on the market already. In the periodical Banyue Tan, which is a Chinese journal, the Chinese media reported on July 27th that in recent years, power banks that can eavesdrop, position individuals, and have other functions that spy on users are sold on the market. Just by modifying a built-in communication SIM card, the power bank can be transformed into a listening device and a tracker, enabling remote monitoring and precise positioning anytime, anywhere. Now, according to the report, when a resident last name Wang in Guiyang City took his power bank in for repair, the technician found eavesdropping and positioning equipment in it. The technician told him that once someone uses the function remotely, Mr. Wang's life will be on, quote, live broadcast without him ever knowing it. And these types of power banks are everywhere. They vary in color and style, but most of them have functions such as remote monitoring and recording and precise positioning. And that can also be customized. The price ranges from 300 yuan to 600 yuan, which is about $45 to $90 on the market, and they're sold on some Chinese online marketplaces. The Banyue Tan report says that they ordered some of the power banks, and they followed the instructions to download an app called GPS 365 to a cell phone, and they used that logging information provided by the seller to see all the functions such as positioning, trajectory, electronic fence, contracts, and messages on its webpage on the cell phone. And the reporter clicked on location and found that the movement, this mapping of the power bank carrier can be clearly detected and recorded, even in subways, parking lots, and other locations. And it does not affect the accuracy of positioning function, whether they're in a subway station or whether they're high up in some towers. And the sellers also told the reporter that if the voice-activated chat function is set up in the app, the recording function will be activated to record all the sound around the power bank that is to 50 decibels or higher and automatically transmit it to the cell phone. Now, this isn't 007, right? This isn't Jason Bourne. This is regular Chinese manufactured devices. And most of the sellers on the marketplaces promise that customers can choose the functions, meaning that they can choose color, style, And the functions of the power bank, whether you want to spy on people or you want to listen in or record something or track somebody, whatnot. And so there seems to be no regulation against adding recording functions to devices. And it aligns with the surveillance state apparatus that the Chinese regime already uses on its own people. China officially recognizes and admits to surveillance and often propagandizes it for the sake of the people's safety, which has been controversial as stabbings continue to happen in China, and it seems perpetrators are often not caught. And this, however, should not undermine the tracking and spying capabilities, especially under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, whereas they basically use it against good people. As well, the control is a huge aspect, perhaps everything to the party. Because without control, the party is in shambles, and they can't have that. And thank you so much for watching tonight. This is China Insider. I'm David Zhang. We'll see you next time.